I think that sufficient time has passed where we can now ask the question, who won? Who won the war on terror? So let's go ahead and look at some numbers and see if we can answer that question. Well, when you take Iraq, for example, there were 4,488 U.S. service personnel that were killed directly. And by the way, that number may have risen since then. I believe this article I'm referencing was written in 2012. There's been 32,223 of our troops injured. That's not including PTSD, which is a big problem in and of itself. The projected total cost of the war by the year 2053, $7 trillion. Oh, that's such a large amount of money, it drives you crazy. And then when you look at Afghanistan, at least 2,091 U.S. service deaths occurred. About 20,000 people were injured. That's not including PTSD again. And then when you look at Al-Qaeda, and when you look at terrorist deaths, of course we know bin Laden is dead, among a whole bunch of other top commanders. I see the articles just like I'm sure you do, where it says, we got the Al-Qaeda number 2 in command, for example. How many times have you seen that headline? But, I mean, it's impossible to really find a total figure, as in X amount of Al-Qaeda operatives have been killed. I did extensive research. I wasn't able to find that number. But what we do know is this. In Iraq, there's been 134,000 civilians that were killed directly. There's been 655,000 people who died in Iraq since the invasion that would have not died if the invasion had not occurred. There's 2.8 million people who remain either internally displaced or have fled the country completely. Since the war on terror began, there's been a net increase in the number of terrorists and the number of terrorist attacks. Research in that area, particularly a study that was done, I believe, in 2007, refers to that as the Iraq effect. The CIA calls it blowback, unintended consequences of an interventionist foreign policy. Of the thousands of people our drone strikes killed, and we're looking at Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, among other places, only 2% of the deaths have been Al-Qaeda operatives. That's amazing. A 98% fail rate. Only 2% are members of Al-Qaeda. Now remember, they've been peddling it to us all along as, of course, we need the drone strikes to kill terrorists. Duh, everybody knows that. Yeah, but only 2% of the time you're killing the right people. We might look at that as a slight problem. I don't know. So, the CIA estimates that today, see, now we're getting really into some meat and potatoes and some details that the mainstream media largely glosses over if they discuss at all. How did we do? According to the CIA, estimates that is that today in Afghanistan, there are between 50 and 100 members of Al-Qaeda. Now, think about that. We have 68,000 troops that are there. 68,000 dudes to fight between 50 and 100 dudes? And that's not me, and it's not some liberal progressive blog that came up with that number. That's our CIA admitting that. And then, by the way, there was a Democratic politician who alluded to that, and PolitiFact looked into it. They ranked it true. Now, how many people do you think know that? That we're fighting between 50 and 100 dudes in Afghanistan with thousands of American soldiers. And then, by the way, when they say, oh, when we withdraw, we're still going to leave between 5,000 and 20,000 people there. Why? Why do you need that many people? There's nobody in Al-Qaeda there, between 50 and 100 guys. But now here's where it gets really interesting. Back in 2004, in a video addressed to the American people, bin Laden described what his plan was. His plan was to bleed the United States until bankruptcy. Quote, all that we have to do is to send 2 mujahideen to the farthest point east to raise a piece of cloth on which is written Al-Qaeda in order to make the generals race there to cause America to suffer human, economic, and political losses without their achieving for it anything of note other than some benefits to their private companies. So we are continuing this policy in bleeding America to the point of bankruptcy. The twin goals of the strategy were to drain the U.S. of resources by baiting it into an expensive, open-ended military intervention like those in Iraq and Afghanistan, with resulting anger over those interventions causing more people to join Al-Qaeda's cause. So, objectively speaking, both of those goals have been met. We're over $16 trillion in debt. We have wasteful military spending to the tune of 900 bases overseas. It's an empire we've created. And Al-Qaeda recruiting is up. Now, I don't know if you know this, but northern Mali, for example, that is now basically Al-Qaeda-stan. To the point where other Western countries are going, yeah, we're actually going to go fight a war in Mali because the entire northern part of the country is run by Al-Qaeda. So everything is out of whack in terms of there's no Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, but we're fighting Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Northern Mali is nothing but Al-Qaeda operatives. Overall, there's been a net increase in terrorists and terrorism since the invasion of Iraq. It's just like the drug war where they say, we need to fight a war on drugs. Okay, so how do you define winning the war on drugs? Well, obviously that would mean less people taking drugs, right? That would be, by definition, a victory. You want to decrease the number of people taking drugs. Well, by their own criteria, the war on drugs has failed. Because there's more people taking drugs now, even after we blew $1 trillion for no goddamn reason, right? Since the beginning of the war on drugs until today. Same thing for the war on terrorism. If your goal was to reduce terrorism, you fucking increased it. No, man, it's about time. And I haven't heard anybody give this analysis yet. But, you know, facts are stubborn things. We've lost the war on terror. We've made it worse.